All right, so we're gonna do the French knot and I'm gonna show you the Colonial knot. So here's the thing. The French knot is perfectly fine as an option. Sorry, I'm gonna do a quilter's knot actually to start this. Since there's nothing for me to grab onto with my knot, I have to do a nice big knot, and the easiest way to do that is with a quilter's knot. So you're gonna lay your thread on top of your needle, kind of pinch, I put my finger on top of it to hold it, wrap, 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 wrap. I like to do a huge one because you really don't want it coming through, especially when you're trying to get a French knot done. So you've made this massive knot at the back. I'm gonna trim it so that there's not a ton. I don't want to pull that too tight because then it just makes the knot smaller. Okay, so we're gonna do a French knot first, and then we're gonna do a Colonial knot. The reason that I'm showing you both of these is sometimes people struggle with a French knot and they'll be able to do a Colonial knot, and sometimes they struggle with a Colonial knot and they'll be able to do a French knot. I think taking a little bit of floss and testing that, if you are comfortable with the French knot, I would stick with that. If you're comfortable with the Colonial knot, I'd stick with that. So I wanted to give options because I know this is probably one of the more difficult parts of this kit is the actual French knots or the Colonial knots. So we're gonna start with the French knot. So one thing is this knot at the back, if you hit that and you try to stick through that, you're gonna mess your whole thing up. So I kind of just like try to keep it, I'll move it out of the way and I'll show you how I do that. So first to start, you can kind of lay your ornament on the bottom. I like to like push it onto a table and then kind of put my hand on top of it so that it doesn't move. So it's stationary right now. And then I'm going to wrap my floss around. I think 4 times is pretty good for these holes. I think that's about the right amount. Okay, and then I'm gonna stick my needle through and I'm gonna push it down onto the table. And then I'm going to use this thread to pull my knot down to the surface of the wood. And then I'm going to kind of pinch my thumb on it. And I just want to check at the back. I am going right through that knot. So I don't want to do that because it's going to be harder. So I'm going to slide the knot out of the way and push. See how I'm holding this thread here to keep the tension there? And then I've got my finger on top of that knot. That's how I'm kind of keeping everything from coming apart. So I've got my thumb on both and I'm pulling this thread through, and I'm trying not to pull too hard because I can pull the knot through. I just want to do a nice gentle little knot, and that's the best way to do it, or in my opinion the most beginner friendly, is to hold it down with your hand, wrap, wrap, wrap. I want to do 4 of those. This one's going to be easier because there's nothing behind it. Ideally, when you're doing these, I would not do my French knots first. I would make sure there was something else here so that I can just slide my thread behind that other thread and catch my knot on that instead of having a big knot at the back of my hole. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the video about starting and securing your knots. That'll help you understand what I'm trying to say here. So we've wrapped this around our needle, as you can see. So I'm going to push this into the hole. Got it in my hole. The end of the needle is pushed up against the wood at the bottom, and I'm pulling this thread, which makes my knot get down to the surface of the wood. Then I'm holding that still while I pick up my wood. And I'm trying not to pull it too tight because the tighter I pull it, the smaller my knot's going to get, and the harder it's going to be to get that thread through the hole, the knot, sorry. And if you're having trouble getting the thread through the knot, it's just gonna make this hole tighter and tighter, or this knot tighter and tighter and tighter. And when that knot gets tighter, it's gonna get smaller, and then that you tugging is gonna pull it through the hole. So then I've created this little knot. And we're gonna do it one more time. Do half this with the French knots and half without. So we're laying our wood on the table. Once you get better, you can hold it. Like I can hold the ornament and do it, but the first few times I did this, it is definitely trickier than it is on fabric where you're holding it in maybe a hoop stand. So 4 wraps around, and then I'm holding it and I'm putting my needle down through the hole, sorry. I'm pulling my knot to the surface of my wood. You can even use my finger to push it down, holding the tension as I pick up my wood. Pushing my needle through, and then now that it's at the surface, it's a little easier, and then I'm pulling through. This worries me because when you get these kind of knot things, the harder you pull, that's when your knot ends up going through. So let's see if I can do this without pulling my knot through the hole. I've created a little bit of a knot on the wrong side. So my thread just got twisted, which then created like a knot at the surface of my knot. And there we go. So gently pulling through, because if you're tugging as hard as you can, that knot's gonna get as much tension on it on the wood, and that's when it's gonna pull through. If I tugged really, really hard on the back right now, I could probably tug that knot right through. Hopefully not, but you can. So let's do our colonial knot now. Okay, so for our colonial knot, we've come up from the back of the fabric, or from the back of the wood, and essentially you create this C shape, backwards C shape. So you have to kind of do it slowly, and eventually it gets easier and easier because I don't need to do it this slow anymore, but for the sake of showing you, this is how we're gonna do it. So you've created this backwards C, and then you wanna go with your needle over top of this bottom part of the C, and then, so you're going through the loop, but instead you don't go through underneath, you go through into it. So from the top, over top of the bottom half, and underneath the top half of the C. And then what ends up happening is you create kind of this like loop where it's trapped, the needle is trapped inside of the loop, and then you're kind of crossed over. You can see that the thread crosses over at the bottom there, and then you're gonna wrap. So it creates what they call a figure eight is the goal, is to create like this figure eight shape. And then I wrapped 2 times around the needle after I put it into there. And then you could do the same thing that we did where you're putting it down on the ground and then pulling. So you're putting it onto the table, your needle is pushing down onto the wood underneath, or the table underneath, and then pulling that kind of secured, and then pushing and pulling it through. It's gonna knot again. Jeez. Oops. I'm gonna try to show you guys a trick to get this thread to stop twisting too. Okay, so I've made that. Okay, so my thread is twisting at the back, well, as it's going through, so something like it's all twisted up. So I'm trying to straighten out this so that those twirls and those like twists that are happening that are causing it to make a knot stop. Just untwisting that. Okay, so we got 2 more. So we're gonna come up from the back and we're gonna create this C shape. Okay. It's sometimes like, see how mine's trying to flip, that's fine, but you wanna just create your C. I'm just trying to get you guys to be able to see it. So created your C, putting your needle over top the bottom half and through, and it's gonna create kind of this crossover. And then 1, 2. And if we're going with what we were doing before where we're using the table, we're just gonna stick it in, pull my knot down, and then lift this up. And then pull it through. Okay, and then our last one. Now I think the reason that I think some people might find this easier to do, and the reason that I put it as an option, is because once you get it through your C and then wrapped around, the twisting around the needle doesn't come undone as easily as it might in a French knot. So people tend to find that the wrapping comes undone. It doesn't happen as easily with the colonial knot, I find. People seem to have an easier time keeping it wrapped, but it's a very similar stitch. So if you've already done the French knot a lot, you don't maybe want to do that. I do find that the French knot looks a little cleaner, mind you. The colonial knot's a little messier. Maybe it's just the way I'm not pulling it tight enough, but that is the 2 options that I have for you, and all of my best suggestions on how to be the most successful with your French knots. Hopefully that helps. Good luck. If you need any help or you're having any issues, you can always send me a message and we can chat about it. and I can give you some more one-on-one help.